ANC leaders have been meeting to discuss the state of the economy following this week's devastating jobs numbers. Mounting economic trouble is top of the agenda at the governing Pali Lehohla that started yesterday and will continue on Monday. Stats SA released data this week showing that more than 2 million jobs were lost in the second quarter of this year, and more job seekers actually stopped looking for work at the height of the coronavirus lockdown. To expand on this, then, let's bring in former Statistician-General Pali Lehohla, who joins us by Skype. A very good afternoon, well, good evening, in fact, to you, Dr. Lehohla. So, you listen to the ANC and you read the statement that came out ahead of this Lehohla. They talk about the need for extraordinary interventions, and you wonder why that has still not materialized, given that we've been in a jobs crisis for years.
Yes, I think, well, we've lost 2.2 million jobs now. We should add to the 10 million that are already out of jobs, which gives us about 12 million people unemployed in South Africa. This time around, that's a significant number, and it will not be back on jobs soon. The question is, one needs to see what program has been there in government that deals with matters of jobs. I doubt very much whether in the short period of time we can actually address the joblessness, but it's an urgent matter that has to be addressed. But there has to be evidence up front, like a business plan, that like a person who does a business plan says, I'm having this business plan, I'll be selling these kinds of goods and services, and I'll earn so much profit. You need a similar plan that says, in the 12 million people that are unemployed, this is my plan to solve their problems year in, year out. I think if you look at the State of the Nation address at the beginning of the year, the president said that there will be 200,000 jobs created per year. That gives you only 2 million jobs in 10 years. Then the budget speech by the Minister of Finance said 100,000 jobs a year, and that gives you only 1 million jobs in 10 years. Now, from January or February, when the State of the Nation address was made, and now at the time of coronavirus, the question is, what is the promise? And what is the basis for that promise? And what is the evidence around that promise? And what is the roadmap to execute that promise?
You raise a key issue, Dr. Lehohla, there, the disconnect between government jobs forecasts and the statistics from Stats SA and other entities, which even before this 2.2 million jobs that were lost in the lockdown was already so grim that a forecast, as you say, of creating 2 million jobs in a decade was already terribly under what's required. So I wonder then why there is that disconnect between the statistics and the planning from government.
There's always been that disconnect all the time. I mean, there is a problem that, you know, in the government plans, the NDP says one thing, that we would like to have a 6% unemployment by 2030. And by 2018, the unemployment is heading towards 30%. And today, in 2020, that unemployment has risen to 42%. That is with the discouraged. But on top of that, you have to add the 2.2 million, which means we are almost at 57%. So even pre-crisis, we had a situation that there was a serious disconnect in terms of what government suggests are the targets for unemployment and the reality on the ground. And fundamentally, there is something wrong with the planning. And I need to repeat this, that a macroeconomic framework doesn't take into account a major macroeconomic variable, which is employment and unemployment. It only takes largely matters of growth of the GDP and debt to GDP ratio and inflation target. But the issue of employment is not in that plan. And that's what gets financed. So you can't expect any miracle unless that macroeconomic framework is tampered with. There's very little evidence that this will ever be addressed.
I recall comments that you were making at a Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation event. This was around July, where you were speaking about the need to be explicit about both our challenges and the path towards solutions. Do you think we're finally moving in that direction now?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Perhaps the urgency of corona might make us do so. I've not seen a document up to so far that convinces me that that is the situation. I think I've seen the document by Business South Africa, where they actually say our targets for unemployment will be 15% by 2030. Our growth target will be 5%. And the debt to GDP ratio will be around 50%. And inequality will be 43%. I think what business has signaled is very, very significant in its own right. That for the first time, Business South Africa realizes that they cannot survive as business with the inequality, the levels of unemployment that occur in South Africa. But one is yet to see the roadmap. The government document was just showing 2 to 3.5 million public works, expanded public works jobs, and that's the only target. The target in the Treasury document of June last year, of August 2019, was saying 1 million jobs in 10 years and 2.3% growth. I haven't seen a new document that discusses these targets. Neither have I seen a roadmap that points out what will be done. And therefore, I'm left rather with a cold sense of comfort in as far as how this problem is solved.
And what makes the situation... Please finish your point, Doctor.
Pardon?
I was just saying you can finish your point there. I cut you off.
Yes, but what we also know is really we are in such serious trouble with the levels of corruption that are being revealed. That doesn't leave us in any hopeful space at all.
And you speak of not being in a hopeful space, and the reality is the more jobs that are lost in South Africa or people who struggle to indeed find work, that can be linked to some of the rising crime in the country. Poorer access to healthcare becomes an issue. Violence as well in South African communities. All those three things are just among the other factors that are likely to rise with an increasing state of joblessness, isn't it?
It is. I think that the President has pointed out to say that post-corona must be different. And I think it's a clear message. But we can't expect the President to define what that post-corona thing will be. We need to put shoulder to wheel to illustrate what that post-corona will be. And for me, it starts with a proper plan. And by a plan, I mean there are targets and there is a roadmap to achieving that. And that plan, because plans are forward-looking things by definition, you cannot plan as you are in the space. You have to plan into the future, into 10 years. And that requires competence in modeling, in saying, if I were to do this, this is what is likely to happen. And then testing that model for robustness, and then delivering on it. At the moment, we don't have that modeling capability in the government. And I don't see how the evidence for such an execution can be before us. So we'll be promised things that might just collapse. And we can be dealing with these things from a point of being desperate. And in that desperation, things can actually collapse and we end up in a worse situation. So handling things in terms of forward-looking models, the Chinese do this all the time. We don't in South Africa. The kinds of things that we do are almost models for business cycles. It's based on CGE, which just looks at how the economy performs on a month-to-month or year-to-year basis. That cannot be the basis for a plan. A plan is a long-term thing. That has to bring how long and how when you think a mine. And that means bringing policies and discourse around policies and looking at the effects of those policies over a 10-year to 20-year period. One thing that human life brings about is that longevity is predictable. People live now for 90 years. People now live for 70 years. Life expectancy is one thing against which you can actually provide for a model-based process to understand where you will be by year X. Now, the NDP was a document that was produced. Nobody ever cared about it. It was never translated into a planning system or a plan. And in the absence of a planning system, in the absence of a plan, in the absence of competencies to put those things together, just always remember that the bread will not be well cooked. It will be a poor baked bread, which will cause you stomachache and diarrhea.
Dr. Pali Lehohla, on that very sobering note, let's leave it there. The former Statistician-General speaking to us on the back of that ANC Lehohla that's happening this weekend. It started Friday to continue Monday, Faith, but the thing is, you listen to some of that analysis and you wonder if we will ever actually get it right.
And on the other side of it, I mean, Thembekile, we're speaking about plans. I mean, we all know that South Africa is notorious for actually coming up with plans. So, for example,
we're a country of planners.
We're a country of planners. The NDP remains one such a plan. The issues around the effective implementation of such plans, and unfortunately, we've not seen the results of that. And one wonders exactly how we're going to get over the curve where unemployment is concerned.